You will notice throughout this lesson that purpose and audience go hand in hand. Often an author's purpose has a lot to do with how they want their intended audience to respond to their work. Identifying the target audience of the text you are analysing is a very important step in the literary analysis process. So how do we work out who exactly a text was written for? Well, having an understanding of the author's contextual background is crucial to identifying the intended audience of a particular literary work. If we know what was happening in the personal, social, cultural, or political world of the author at the time they were composing their work, they can often tell us what we need to know. Some examples of specific target audiences include the author's academic or professional contemporaries, that is, fellow writers and thinkers in their field of expertise, the general public living in the author's social sphere, or political authorities responsible for making decisions on behalf of the public. A text's audience can be defined as its intended readership, or as Oxford Languages defines it, the people who are most likely to give attention to the work. This definition suggests that the audience includes those who would be most interested in the text's content and subject matter, and those who possess the appropriate level of language skills or education to engage with its content and ideas. Some key questions we can ask ourselves as we are working to identify the target audience include: number 1, who did the author have in mind when they were writing their text? Number 2, what social, historical, or cultural demographic is most likely to relate to the text's messages? Number 3, who has the relevant skills, interests, or education to engage with the text? Number 4, was it important that certain members of the population receive a particular message conveyed through the text? And number 5, what values are upheld or rejected through the text? Who does the author believe needs to receive the message about which values should be upheld or rejected? Sometimes identifying who a text isn't written for can help us to work out who the author had in mind when they were writing, and it can also tell us a little bit more about their values. It is necessary to consider who might be excluded from the list of intended audience members. Sometimes a text's subject matter or level of language, for example, may not be appropriate for certain members of the population. Throughout history, some texts have received criticism as it is quite clear that they have been written for certain classes or education levels at the exclusion of people who have not had access to the privilege of being in the educated, literate classes. Depending on the text, it might be helpful to think about, number 1, who may not have the level of literacy, skills, or education to interpret the text, and number 2, does the level of language or language style indicate that the text was written for a particular group at the exclusion of others? Texts with formal, sophisticated, or technical language, or those that use lots of jargon that requires education in a certain field, can often alienate certain audiences. Such texts are not likely written for the general public. In these cases, it is helpful to consider who exactly would be able to understand and appreciate the complexities of the text.